The year is 1846, and the sun has just dipped below the horizon, casting London in an eerie gloom. You find yourself amidst the labyrinthine streets of the bustling metropolis, where gaslight flickers illuminate the dense fog that clings to the buildings. The air is alive with the sounds of the day receding into the distance, replaced by an unsettling silence broken only by the distant rumble of a carriage and the murmur of an unseen river. It's a moment pregnant with anticipation, a pause before the night unfurls its mysteries, and then you hear it, a lone call echoing through the stillness. 1 o'clock and all is well. The words hang in the air, a beacon in the gathering darkness, announcing the arrival of the Night Watchmen. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the shadows of history, consider subscribing for more forgotten tales and eerie stories from the past. There's so much more to discover. Your support helps us create more of these unique stories. Before the days of Sherlock Holmes patrolling the foggy streets of London, there were the Night Watchmen, unsung guardians of the dark, fog-drenched streets of Victorian England. These men were the backbone of an age-old tradition dating back to medieval times, when Londoners sounded the evening alarm, summoning able-bodied men to keep watch against threats like fires, enemy invasions, and, most importantly, thieves. But by the 19th century, the Watchmen had become a relic of a bygone era, their purpose blurred in a city grappling with rampant crime and rapid industrialization. As the clock tower chimed 1, ushering in the night, a handful of weary men emerged from their posts, marking the beginning of their lonely vigil. Among them was Thomas, a retired soldier in his late 50s, his face a roadmap of past battles, now replaced by the quiet war he was fighting against the shadows. There was James, a young man whose family relied on his meager earnings to survive, his eyes betraying his nervousness at the daunting task ahead. And then there was Samuel, a seasoned watchman, his gait slow but steady, carrying within him the wisdom gleaned from years on the beat. These men were not your typical heroes. They were everyday Londoners, often elderly, poor, or ex-soldiers like Thomas, who had seen better days. With limited prospects, they turned to the night watch as a last resort, donning the distinctive blue coat and brass-buttoned helmet, becoming symbols of authority in a sea of darkness. Armed with little more than a lantern, a wooden staff, and the responsibility of keeping watch, they set off into the eerie silence of the city. Their presence was a stark reminder of the vulnerability of London's citizens. As the darkness deepened, the city transformed into a labyrinth of hidden dangers. The flickering gaslights did little to pierce the gloom, leaving the streets shrouded in mystery and menace. Each corner held a new uncertainty, each shadow a potential threat. For these men, the night was never truly theirs. They were merely passing through a realm controlled by the darkness itself, where the line between safety and peril was razor thin. Their patrols took them through the city's winding cobblestone alleys and across the deserted squares, where the silence was deafening. With every step, they were confronted with the realities of life in 19th-century London, the stench of waste, the haunting cries of street vendors, and the muffled sounds of poverty. They were the silent witnesses of a city grappling with its demons, its joys and sorrows echoing in the night. Yet these men did not falter. They walked on, their lanterns casting long dancing shadows on the walls, serving as both a guiding light for themselves and a warning to any lurking dangers. Every so often they would stop, raise their staff, and call out the time. 1 o'clock and all is well. It was a ritual that was part reassurance for the public and part reminder to themselves that they were not alone. In that moment, the watchman might have felt a momentary sense of camaraderie with his fellow guards across the city, united in their solitary vigil. But as the night wore on, the reality of their isolation would return. The response to their calls was usually silence, a silence that could be unnerving in the extreme. Sometimes, however, they would hear the echo of their own voices carried back to them by the fog, creating an eerie auditory mirage that played tricks on their already frayed nerves. Their duties were simple, yet crucial. They patrolled the streets, keeping an eye out for fires, reporting crimes, and guiding drunkards home. But their powers were limited. They were not supposed to make arrests or engage in fisticuffs with criminals. They were just observers, chroniclers of the night's events, often bearing witness to the darker side of humanity without having the means to intervene. In many ways, they were the first responders, the ones who would rush to the scene when the alarm was sounded. But they were not equipped to handle the situations they were often thrust into. Imagine the scene, the gaslights painting grotesque shadows on the walls as you, a watchman, respond to the desperate pleas of a woman whose home is ablaze. You rush to the scene, your lantern swinging, but what can you really do? You alert the fire brigade and stand by helplessly as she watches her entire life as work turn to ash. Such tragedies were not uncommon in London's crowded and poorly regulated slums, and the watchmen were often the first to arrive, bearing witness to the despair unfolding before them. These men were not only facing physical dangers, but also the threat of ridicule. Their efforts were often mocked by the public, who saw them as clueless old men, unable to cope with the complexities of a changing city. The satirical newspapers of the time were particularly harsh, publishing caricatures of the Night Watchmen, portraying them as bumbling fools. They were called Charlies, a derogatory term that stuck and became synonymous with the Night Watchman. Despite the mockery, they persevered, driven by a sense of duty and the need to put food on the table for their families. Yet they were not immune to the perils of the night. In the dimly lit streets, they were easy targets for the very criminals they were trying to prevent. Some watchmen were beaten, others killed. The threat of violence was always present, a dark cloud hanging over their heads as they made their rounds. Imagine the scene. You are a night watchman, alone in the fog-laden streets, when suddenly a gang of young hooligans emerges from the darkness. They jeer at you, taunting you with accusations of being too old to do the job. Their words are sharp, their eyes gleaming with mischief, and then they strike, their numbers overwhelming, their anger fierce. You fight back, swinging your staff, but how long can you resist? Eventually the attackers overpower you, leaving you bruised and battered on the cold, hard pavement. This wasn't just a risk they took. It was a real possibility in their daily lives. The danger was not just in the dark alleys, it was everywhere. Yet they kept returning to the streets, their courage tested with every step. Despite the danger, the loneliness, and the scorn, these men stood as silent sentinels, their presence a testament to the human spirit's resilience. They were the Night Watchmen, the forgotten heroes of London's underbelly, whose service to their city went largely unnoticed, their sacrifice lost in the fog and shadows of London's dark past. In their darkest hours, they offered the city a semblance of security, laying the foundation for the modern law enforcement that we take for granted today. Although their methods were rudimentary and their equipment minimal, they were the pioneers of a profession that has evolved into one of the most critical pillars of society. Without the groundwork laid by these brave souls, the story of policing as we know it might have taken a very different path. In the annals of history, their names might have been lost to time, but their legacy lives on in the brave men and women who continue to serve and protect. As the fog begins to lift, and the first rays of dawn peek through the clouds, the night watchmen return to their posts, ready to relinquish their vigil to the rising sun. The city, now awakened, stretches and yawns, oblivious to the dangers that had lurked in the night. The night watchmen, their duty done, disappear into the morning mist, leaving behind the echoes of their lonely calls. Today, their story is largely forgotten, their contributions overshadowed by the grandeur of Sherlock Holmes and the metropolitan police force he represents. However, the impact of the night watchmen on London's history cannot be overstated. They were the first line of defense against the chaos of a rapidly changing city. They were the silent heroes who walked alone in the fog, protecting a city that barely noticed them. They were the Night Watchmen.